Hello, and welcome to our discussion on Kill Bill, Volume 1. I am Lady Snowblood, here with Grammy Award-winning artist SZA. How you doing, SZA? Great to have you on. Real honor, honestly.
Did you say SZA as opposed to the RZA? Okay.
Yeah. Well, no, SZA did a song, Kill Bill, which came out earlier this year.
I haven't heard of SZA. I've only heard of RZA.
If only we could get SZA to do a collab with RZA.
Nice one. For a second, because I got the Lady Snowblood reference, and I was like, oh my god, am I actually going to get the references at the beginning that you do? Or you lost me on the second
I gave 1 out of 2 ain't bad, and I gave myself the one that you were more apt to recognize, and gave you the one that I was hoping you wouldn't pick up on.
Okay, perfect. Your plan was expertly executed.
Yeah, so, Kill Bill Volume 1. It has been 20 years since the release of Kill Bill Volume 1.
How does that make you feel?
It makes me feel really old, and I'll get into my end in a moment here, but I wanted to ask you first. What was your first experience hearing about or seeing this movie?
I remember vividly when it was coming out. I was 3 years old. No. So I had heard about this movie growing up. My parents are Tarantino fans, and I always saw this movie on the shelf, and obviously it's a very catchy title. And I always saw the cover with, the bride in her outfit with, holding a sword. So it was, always, a prevalent movie that I was aware of. Just wasn't allowed to watch for a while. And funny enough, I think I was, 9 or 10 when my dad showed me Pulp Fiction.
Okay.
So I watched Pulp Fiction, before I ever saw Kill Bill, which I think is kind of a strange order, at least from my perspective of, showing your kid Tarantino. I almost feel like Kill Bill might be a more logical first one to show. I was about, 13 when my dad was like, all right, it's time to show you Kill Bill. And this was right when I was kind of getting into anime and stuff too. And I think that's what kind of cued him into being like, oh, Brandon likes anime. I better show him Kill Bill, for obvious reasons. It wears some anime influence on its sleeve. It has an anime segment, which I know we'll talk about. But yeah, and it goes without saying, it's a fucking wonderful movie. And I even knew that as a 13-year-old. Even though I loved it quite a bit when I was younger, I've gained much more appreciation for as I've gotten older. That's pretty much my experience with Kill Bill.
This does make me feel old.
For sure.
I remember the trailers before this movie actually even came out. In terms of where I was at, I was maybe 10 or 11 by the time this came out. So I was starting to really gel with what I was into. And when I saw this was coming out, I thought it looked great. I know I didn't watch it right away. I remember seeing Robot Chicken parody Kill Bill with the Easter Bunny. And that was my first experience at seeing something from this movie aside from the trailer before watching the movie. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Robot Chicken was what really got me into Kill Bill. So,
that's you could put that quote on the DVD cover. I love this movie because of Robot Chicken.
When I did eventually see this movie, I loved it right away. I remember when I first saw it as a kid, thinking the anime style blood splatter stuff. I was like, oh man, it's not realistic, and it's this whole movie zany.
Went right over your
head. The fact
head.
that even then, it really did. Yeah, when I was a kid, I was just like, oh, I just wish it was a little more gritty and realistic. Because probably at that time, my favorite movie was The Punisher from 2004.
Yes, right alongside in quality with Kill Bill.
Watched it within a year or so of its release, and never looked back. Still listen to the soundtrack on a regular basis.
Yeah, great soundtrack. Kind of a nice mix of different film scores as well as flat out TV show intros and moments and stuff like that, which is kind of a normal trope for Tarantino. He loves to reuse a lot of music from what influenced him, and I always thought that was kind of cool and utilized usually fairly appropriate in his movies.
Well, speaking on what you mentioned earlier with the RZA and working on this movie, Tarantino had him help produce the soundtrack and find a lot of these sound clips that he would use. Now it's funny because when Tarantino tells the story about how they collaborated with each other, he's like, oh, I didn't even ask him. It was just we were talking about our favorite things and it was natural or whatever. And then RZA right after is just like, Yeah, he asked me to produce the film, you know. I told him I could do it. So it's like, okay.
That's funny.
So much for that being organic. I really like RZA's take. It does feel like a collaboration between Tarantino and RZA on the soundtrack in terms of all the different clips from movies. I think it's a fun grab bag of different samples.
I agree. I'm not sure which tracks were specifically like remixed from the RZA.
I guess the one song that maybe you should check out is RZA's Ode to Oren Ishii. Half American, half Japanesey. So beautiful. Damn, what a species.
Is that staying in?
Those are lyrics. Yes, that is staying in.
Oh, those are the lyrics.
from
Okay,
a
I didn't
great-
even know that. Okay.
Yeah, this is his yeah, he brought that. Anyway. I don't know. I wanted to find a reason to talk about
Does that play in the film at all?
Not at all, of course not. But it's
Okay.
on the soundtrack. It's just so cringe.
Yeah,
I
that's
wanted
like
to
a
find a
4
reason to bring that
Kids
up.
like anime opening quality right there.
Oh, well, 4Kids One Piece opening is still my favorite. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I almost think the Wulin Warriors opening like might top it though.
Oh, that's like a rip of the Wu-Tang, so that's full circle.
Mm-hmm.
Damn. What do you say we just get right into it? I know that Tarantino had it in mind for Uma Thurman to do this role, and Uma Thurman got pregnant, and so they waited a year for that, and then they actually followed through with it, and in that time they collaborated a bunch.
It was actually kind of Uma Thurman's idea because I guess while they were making Pulp Fiction together, they both got along really well, and Tarantino was just like I guess they were just bullshitting after shooting one day, and they were like having some drinks at a bar, and Tarantino was like, "I want to put you in a revenge movie. I want to make like a good old fashioned like exploitation revenge film, and I want you to be the star." And then Uma Thurman was like, "Okay, what if the first shot you see the main girl covered in blood, and then it pans out and she's wearing like a bridal gown?" And then Tarantino was like, "Ooh, that sounds good." So they both kind of created the character of the bride. I guess like after they had that conversation, Tarantino like kind of rushed home and started writing the script, and I guess he wrote like 30 pages and even talked to like Harvey Weinstein, who was producing his movies at the time.
Woof.
And yeah. Not much more that needs to be said about him.
Yeah.
But and I guess like it was like greenlit and everything, but then he kind of, because he had just made From Dusk Till Dawn, which he wrote and starred in, and that movie is very much so kind of an exploitation film, and he didn't want to make 2 exploitation films in a row, so he decided to go back to like something a little, I guess for lack of a better term, classier, and he made Jackie Brown following Pulp Fiction, and then he waited a solid 6 years, and that's when Kill Bill finally came out. And Kill Bill, in many ways, he considered to be like his ode to like over the top exploitation films.
Yeah, and it's also, this one kind of more so than his previous or even his later films is more of a mishmash of styles than we're used to seeing. He always mishmashes a lot of elements, but like this one specifically goes like all over the world virtually.
It does, yeah, and usually you can pinpoint, like, for instance, Jackie Brown is about, like, blaxploitation films and stuff like that. But then, like, Kill Bill, it's kind of the combination of influences, and you see a lot of familiar things that you've seen many times, but you haven't seen them cut together, like, in this natural way. It creates such a unique vibe, honestly, even though it is, again, very familiar. It becomes its own thing.
Yeah, it cuts deeper than a Hatari Hanzo sword.
Right. Yep.
We start out in 1999, allegedly, where the bride is in a chapel in El Paso, Texas, seen bloodied up on the floor.
Yeah.
And we get dialogue from Bill.
Do you find me sadistic?
And actually, I really do love that we don't see David Carradine's character, Bill, in the first film.
Until Volume 2.
Yeah, exactly, until Volume 2.
It adds mystique, for sure. It definitely builds up the tension of, like, ooh, we're building up to Bill. He's the final boss.
She informs Bill that it's his baby before he blows her brains out.
Super, like, dark, macabre opening, immediately followed by the Nancy Sinatra song in the opening credits, and which, like, I'm actually a really big fan of Nancy Sinatra, so I think it's really cool that one of her songs is in the opening credits. It's just such a dour, like, depressing opening note for a movie. Like, Volume 1 in particular, I think is a really fun movie.
Yeah.
Which is why I think it's a very interesting juxtaposition there. You could say it opens with a bang. Shoots her fucking brains out. I love, like, the credits are so stylish, and I know that goes without saying because it's a Tarantino movie. I do think his movies are works of art. They kind of border on becoming flat-out art house movies. What I think he has in common with a lot of like famous art house auteur directors is his sense of not just stylish credits, but the way he references filmmaking history with his like uses of different fonts and stuff. Like you see like the Pulp Fiction font like come up, and then Kill Bill itself is referenced later in The Hateful Eight, where you see like the specific chapter marks and stuff like that. Reminds me a lot of filmmakers like Lars von Trier, or even Gaspar Noé, who's my favorite director of all time, actually. They do stuff like that, and I think it's a very welcome addition. And like I said, it's just they're such stylish credits, like seeing the way he numbers off each member of the Deadly Viper assassination squad with the actors. Like, you don't see stuff like that in movies very often, you know, and I think it's fun. I think it's really fun.
Yeah, very stylish.
Mm-hmm. Cuts to when she goes after Vivica A. Fox's character, Vernita Green. It's funny, like, Vivica A. Fox, like, you know, known for her classic role in Cool Cat Saves the Kids, you know?
I do not.
Have you not seen the YMS Cool Cat video?
Wait, she has a part in that?
She does. She's in that movie, yeah. And like,
I need to refresh myself. Okay,
she's in it with Eric Estrada for one scene, and they both seem very drunk.
Oof.
It's just funny because she's really good. Like, she's really good in this movie, and this whole opening sequence is awesome. And then I'm just like, wow, she is also in Cool Cat Saves the Kids. You know that. Like, I'm always distracted by that when I watch it. As great as the scene is, and it's not the movie's fault. It's not even really her fault. She was probably just trying to find a job, but
I'm sorry, you're just too distracted by the peak of her career.
Right, yeah.
The thing I love about this opening fight scene is it's so jarring. You know, you have the juxt. You're in a suburban neighborhood, everything's colorful and bright, and you really don't expect this brutal, gritty fight.
Yeah, well, especially coming right off of that macabre opening.
Yes.
You know, that was like entirely in black and white, and then now you have these popping colors, like instantly. We're shown that the movie has a sense of culture to its filmmaking, and it starts off with that slow vibe. But then it immediately goes into the exploitation level of filmmaking. You know, I would argue these two movies, especially Volume 1, it's cartoony to an extent. Especially when she, like, first gives her that look, and you have the, you know, that siren song, the famous wee, 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 you know. Then she immediately starts the fight.
In terms of, like, interesting beats that happen along the way, obviously, the opening fight, it's great. But the moment that Vivica Fox's child shows up...
you see the school bus coming, and then she gets off the bus.
But through just watching their expressions, looking at each other's eyes, they, like, acknowledge that the daughter has come home, they try to make peace, and then they put up a show for the kid. And it's just this tense moment that's so engaging. I love this scene of the mother trying to console her daughter and let her know, like, everything's okay when it so obviously isn't.
Yeah, that goddamn dog of yours went and made a fool of himself, you know. Yeah. I mean, they go much further into this in Volume 2, but I really like how they humanize a lot of these characters. I really feel like, as much as this movie is kind of an amalgamation of hallmarks and tropes, I feel like the characters in the end are all pretty three-dimensional.
Absolutely. And, you know, that's something Tarantino's known for regardless. I will say I do feel like some things are fleshed out a little odd to me. Okay, so jumping ahead slightly and saying this, Lucy Liu's character is obviously the main build that we get to for this film.
Yeah.
So to have a long backstory on her for this makes sense, but also you really get a lack of backstory on some of the other characters, and I find that interesting, but I'll touch upon that a little more as we get along with this.
Yeah, you especially get a lack of backstory for Vernita Green. Chapter 2 is called The Blood-Splattered Bride, and it opens up with the police kind of investigating the scene of the massacre, and then we kind of cut to, 4 years later? I'm pretty sure. And we see her wake up in the hospital bed.
The scene with California Mountain Snake there showing up, dressing up as a nurse, the whole whistling theme. It's kind of funny that she was sent there to kill Beatrix in her sleep, and then Bill has like a change of heart. But it's not really expressed on his end like it was a change of heart. It was almost like he would have never been with the idea. That's why I'm kind of thinking, like, if I had my headcanon, how I would change that is that she thought she would go to impress Bill by doing this, and then he calls, like, actually, no, this isn't going to impress me, don't do it. Versus the idea that he would have commissioned her to do this, in theory. According, like, to the movie logic, the reason for her being there is because Bill had this in his mind to do in the first place, right?
I mean, it could have been that Bill sent her and had a change of heart. I've never really thought much about that, to be entirely honest. It is possibly a weird inconsistency, but I don't really have an issue with it personally.
It's not a big issue. What is a big issue is Buck.
What's your opinion on this little scene that transpires here?
I'm just always amazed that it has that actor who's in a lot of those Billy Madison or Happy Madison productions.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
So I remember him from all these like Adam Sandler films as a kid, and then you see him in here as a rapist.
Yeah.
And that kind of threw me off.
I think this scene in general, like, and I know that Tarantino, he wanted this to be an exploitation film, and he's like notoriously like really into like extreme fucked up movies, and he kind of implements that into a lot of his films. I don't know how necessary it is that this scene is as dark as it is. I mean, the fact that they essentially reveal that the bride has been getting like raped for years while she's been in a coma.
Yeah.
Especially hearing Tarantino talk about how he thinks the bride is a really strong female role model for like young girls to look up to, and that he thinks it'd be awesome for young girls to go see this movie like with their parents and stuff like that. I don't think it was necessary to have that like such an awful like series of events outside of her control like happen to her. Not that I think it weakens her character whatsoever, because it really doesn't.
No.
And I love like her revenge that she gets on Buck and the guy that like attempts to assault her in the scene. I think you could have had a lot of the same beats where maybe Buck be the one who goes in there and then he looks both ways, and then maybe he attempts to assault her and then she stops him. That way it's not like, okay, he's running a business where men are going in there to pay to like have sex with her comatose body. Like that was a little too far for me, maybe. But
yeah, I feel like there's already enough villains in this movie that pertain to this actual story. This whole side piece, while effective, I would just say is a bit gratuitous. So Buck gets fucked. His head is repeatedly bashed in between the door hinge and the door.
Yeah.
Pretty brutal. I actually do like this kill. It's effective.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like the lip bite with the Adam Sandler guy, too. Like, I thought that was pretty cool.
That was brutal, yeah.
And then the whole, like, image of, like, when Buck walks back in the room and you just see him there, like, blood covering his fucking shirt, you know, like that.
And
that was
the
really
music
cool.
as well, for that scene, it's like a slasher movie.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's definitely akin to a slasher movie. I do enjoy the whole pussy wagon setup with her truck and everything.
It's fun that Tarantino owns this vehicle and has used it in several music videos, like with the likes of Missy Elliott and Lady Gaga have had this vehicle. Mm-hmm. In this scene, where Beatrix's legs aren't working, so she's trying to concentrate and get her legs to work, all the while we get a little bit of exposition on Oren Ishii.
This is one of the coolest segments in the movie. I think you would probably agree with me on that, which is chapter 3, I believe, the origin of Oren. I think this scene in particular has made this movie probably more popular in like the anime fandom circle and stuff like that. I was just listening to Tarantino interviews about this movie, and I guess like he danced around with the idea of doing a fully like anime feature that was just about Bill's backstory.
Oh.
Which I think is really cool. What are your thoughts on this whole sequence?
Well, I can't remember. Was this the same animation studio that did like the Animatrix segment?
I believe so.
It's very reminiscent to that style, which 2003, Linkin Park's Breaking the Habit also had that very same animation style. Really popular for a moment.
Not many movies, I think, have like the balls to like switch up like that, but also to like, you know, have the idea of like, yeah, it's going to become an anime just for this backstory.
It's a tragic backstory of her mom and dad being brutally murdered in front of her, unbeknownst to the killers. And she eventually gets revenge.
I think it's very smart that they animated the sequence, because I don't even know if you really could have filmed this in live action.
Well, it's also interesting that O-Ren had her own revenge arc that was seen out to completion. So, you know, they have a lot to relate to. They've experienced similar things in that, right?
Yeah, O-Ren's a great villain to that in that capacity for sure.
Before Beatrix can get to O-Ren, she heads out to Okinawa to have made a custom Hattori Hanzo sword.
I love Sonny Chiba in this movie a lot too. He's so like effortlessly charismatic and funny playing Hattori Hanzo.
He's so great. His demeanor. I love this opening of he thinks that she's a naive foreigner, you know, American.
Yeah.
But he takes it like a liking to her and is trying to like accommodate her.
Well,
and make her feel
he
comfortable
likes her as he's like talking to her. It's not like how it is with the character in Volume 2 who's like just completely awful, you know. Like it's kind of treated as like, oh, he finds it kind of cute how new she is to the culture, or at least that's how she's presenting herself at first.
And I love when they find that out. The one guy, his partner there, is in the back, and you hear the glass of sake break.
Yeah, the bald guy, as I'm pretty sure he's credited, because he has that one line that's like, "I'm not bald, I just shaved my head." I'm pretty sure he's credited as Bald Man or something like that. And you know, like, even though you only get like one real sequence with Hattori Hanzo, he leaves an impression for sure. I really love like the spiritual approach to like Hattori Hanzo making a sword.
I do enjoy that he says, you know, without being egotistical, this is one of my finest swords. And I'm like, oh, you know, that's real humble. Like he's admitting that it's a really good sword. He's like, if you ran into God, you'd be able to cut him down though. It's okay, so humble brag, why don't you?
No, yeah.
So Beatrix receives her custom-made Hattori Hanzo sword. She sets off to Tokyo in the House of Blue Leaves. It's here where we get our... I don't know if this is a flashback or not, but where we're really introduced to O-Ren's crew.
It is a flashback, because it flashes back to when she, like, took power. And you see how that...
Yes.
How that happens.
Well, in this sequence, we do get a little backstory of Gogo's character, where she's seen stabbing someone in the dick. How did you feel about the digital zoom?
Well, it's used appropriately in this movie, yeah. Like, it's...
Okay, I didn't know if it would bother you, because I know how you love your digital zooms there.
Even though it is a digital zoom, the way that they would have dramatic zooms in, like, westerns or martial arts movies is kind of what it's paying tribute to. So I noticed it, and it's not the greatest, especially you kind of see, like, the pixels, like, when it happens, but it's very quick, and I think it works well for this... what it was going for in this context.
I do find the scene super effective where one of the heads of the Yakuza doesn't agree with O-Ren's nationality. His penance is paid by way of losing his head.
Decapitation, yeah. So this is like probably one of the scenes that bothered you as a kid because of the lack of realism with the decapitation.
Yeah, I always thought the head looked zany and silly, and it does. It absolutely looks ridiculous.
I kind of like the camp factor to it.
It's very campy. I think that's the thing. Yeah, that there is a good cheese and camp to this film.
Mm-hmm.
So we're introduced to O-Ren, Gogo, the leader of the Crazy 88s, which his name is escaping me, and her best friend lawyer, Sophie.
The scene which has become iconic now of O-Ren and her crew walking into the House of Blue Leaves. And let's see, the name of the song that plays is called a scene which has become iconic now, which is O-Ren and her crew, the Crazy 88, the Crazy 88, walking down the hallway to the song "Battle Without Honor or Humanity," and this song was originally taken from a Hong Kong crime movie. I forget which one specifically, but it was a remake of an older one that Tarantino was a fan of, and he mentioned that this remake wasn't a great movie, but that this song was just an incredible piece of music that had to be properly utilized. And then he put it in Kill Bill, and it became like one of the most famous songs ever. You know, now you hear it in like everything, and it was kind of parodied to death.
Well, there's also another lead-in with the 5, 6, 7, 8s.
Yeah.
Which is a funny story where Quentin was at a store and he heard them playing on the intercom and asked to buy the CD because he had somewhere to be, and they would have never been in the movie had it not have been for him doing that. And it's just kind of like a funny story of like where something else, like if you hear something, you think it sounds cool, and it's like, oh, I'll get around to listening to that again or checking that out, and unless you act on it in that moment, you never will, kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, for sure. That is I didn't know that story. That's a really cute story. They're actually performing in the movie too. Yeah.
Of course they don't have shoes and they're barefoot because written and directed by Quentin Tarantino.
I actually think the feet stuff in the Kill Bill movies is actually some of the most like appropriately used foot fetish stuff in his movies, because like there are other movies where it's kind of distracting. And even though this is my favorite movie of his, like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, there are a few like really distracting feet moments in that movie. I think it's actually utilized somewhat appropriately. I know it's a funny thing to talk about. I think he utilized his fetish very well, very appropriately in this movie.
Fair enough. Yeah, I would agree. So, how about the crew of the Crazy 88s picking on Charlie Brown?
That was funny. Obviously, rewatching it now, I'm aware of that punchline where they call him Charlie Brown. But they almost kind of like hide the angular texture like on his clothes, and he's even credited as Charlie Brown, which I find really funny.
I felt that was a great gag, and then, you know, the hubristic irony of them picking on this poor guy, and then, they get their comeuppance.
Right, yeah. That's what they deserve, to get chopped to bits for calling him Charlie Brown.
I like the, like, almost ceremonial strike of O-Ren throwing that dart in order to be like, okay, go check it out. Because, like, she recognized that someone was right outside and throws, like, this thing. It's almost like ceremonial like, you know, initiating combat. O-Ren sends a couple of guys off, you know, and Beatrix makes quick work of the first few. Mm-hmm. Then we have a little more skilled fighters come through, and she deads them. Go. And that whole interaction with her being like, hi, and dropping the ball and chain.
Oh, yeah. The sound design in that sequence is, like, absolutely insane. The way like it sounds when she's not only when she's swinging it and you have the over the top like whooshing sound effects, but the way like you hear the chains tangling.
It's all in direct reference to one of my favorite martial arts films of all time, The Master of the Flying Guillotine, which is an influence for a great number of things. Not only this character's weapon in question, but also it was the basis for Mortal Kombat, along with the likes of Bruce Lee's Enter the Dragon. Even when I was a kid, I had seen Master of the Flying Guillotine, which is an old 70s martial arts film, and it was so cool for me as a kid because I actually got the reference. And now Go-Go's actress, who was in the film Battle Royale, which Quentin Tarantino has often mentioned as a film he wishes he directed.
Yeah, he's a huge fan of Battle Royale, which is a great movie. Yeah.
But it's great to have Go-Go here as well.
Mm-hmm. Wearing on his sleeve all the avenues of cinema that he loves, so of course he would put in a Battle Royale actress.
Yeah, in fact, earlier when they have Go-Go stabbing a dude in the dick, that was kind of a direct reference to Battle Royale where she does the same.
Oh, okay, yeah. It's been a while since I've seen Battle Royale.
This fight is pretty fun. You get to see, you know, a little bit of fan service with Go-Go's character and some of the legwork. You know, the whole schoolgirl thing.
I guess so. Isn't she 17 in the movie though?
I guess, yeah. But the brutalness of taking that chair leg or table leg and like stabbing her in the foot and then the head and that scene.
Oh, that was like one of the most brutal moments in the movie for me whenever she got her in the head with that, and you just see the blood raining down. Tarantino's like violence in his movies is so satisfying because like other movies that get mainstream releases like this or get this level of notoriety never have violence on that level that are like, oh my god. I love when it goes black and white. I read in some articles that Tarantino did it to kind of maintain an R rating and not have it go NC-17. I kind of get the impression with Kill Bill that it's a stylistic choice, and there's not even really an appropriate thematic reason for it to become black and white, but it doesn't need one. It's just directly after she pulls the dude's eye out, it becomes black and white for a while. And which is really great because when it becomes color again is on that close-up of her eyes opening up.
Yes. It is interesting to note that the Japanese version does have it colorized. So,
oh, okay.
The only thing that I will note is it is interesting to have the motif of it starts with the eye and then ends with the eyes. But then as soon as like it goes like to regular color, the restaurant owner lady turns the lights out and does this whole like blue light thing. I would have rather instead of coming back to color just go right to the blue light transition. I would have cut the fat on that a little, but that's just me, personal preference.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, no, and I get that. That makes sense. I do think it's kind of cool that there are those, like, multiple stages of the fight where it starts off in color, she pulls the dude's eye out, it's black and white, then you have the silhouette segment. It keeps, like, for it being, like, a long fight scene, it makes it, like, just feel consistently interesting because it's doing different things throughout on a filmmaking level.
It's so funny that the one that she leaves alive is like this innocent looking kid, and she cuts his sword down in front of him and then gives him a spanking, telling him to go home to his mom. That scene wasn't planned and literally was decided upon because when Quentin saw this guy, he's like, he seems so innocent looking, and they added the scene in.
That's great. I didn't know that was added in later. That's one of my favorite parts of the movie, actually.
I love that too.
It's so funny, but again, it's also a very like human moment for the bride too.
And she fights the leader of the Crazy 88s, cuts off his legs.
Yeah.
Gets tossed down into a pool of blood. She had cut through everybody, and this is where she says the following.
Oh, you want me to quote it?
Yeah.
Those of you who still have your lives, get out, but leave the limbs you lost. They belong to me now. She says something like that.
So fucking hardcore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's an amazing line, yeah.
Except for Sophie, who has no such luck, as she's required to stay.
Right.
From here, we get our final fight of this film. Beatrix versus O-Ren.
It's a very, like, classic samurai movie sword fight, too, and it's kind of, like, full of the slow pacing and tension that you see referenced in stuff like Samurai Jack as well. Like, I got a lot of Samurai Jack vibes from it, even though I know that they're both, like, referencing, you know, like, Kurosawa and stuff like that.
Yeah, and this is, like, the set piece is, like, in direct reference to Lady Snowblood. As is the character of O-Ren. I love this whole motif of this, like, quiet area. It's snowy. There's this little water feature.
Oh, I love the way they utilize the water thing refilling and pouring back down. I think it's great that we have this, like, super hardcore, gory action sequence, and it's followed by, like, a very elegant fight between the bride and O-Ren Ishii. Very satisfying. Very simple. Very satisfying.
I remember this always upset me as a kid that Beatrix had to go through all these people and O-Ren's coming in fresh and still loses. Especially when O-Ren even makes mention to the fact that, like, oh, aren't you exhausted? You know, you kind of had to do all that.
I love the respect she pays her, because at first she's kind of just taunting her, but then at a certain point when she realizes, yeah, I'm probably gonna lose, she's like, I take back what I said. But she kind of realizes, okay, this is an honorable death.
Yeah, and just like that, flips her lid back.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the scene of just her cap in the snow.
You just see the hair flying, and then it cuts to, like, the close-up of O-Ren talking, and for a second, you're like, because this movie's gone in some cartoonish directions before, but you're almost like, is her head going to be talking for a second before she dies? And then it pans out and you see that she scalped her, essentially, which I think is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so that is O-Ren's end, and from there, I guess Beatrix just has that last bit of dialogue with Sophie's character.
Yeah, she tells her to like relay to Bill and the rest that she's coming. Very classic movie, like, cliffhanger set up for a sequel sort of thing. As far as the end of Volume 1 goes, and we talked briefly about the whole bloody affair cut, which, like, is both movies cut together. I guess, like, one of the biggest differences is the fact that, like, originally the reveal that the bride's daughter is still alive wasn't supposed to be at the halfway mark of the story. That was something that wasn't supposed to be revealed until, spoilers, the end of Volume 2. I often like think in my head of like how awesome that would have played out, you know, if you go through the whole story and realize that, because it's a pretty good twist, I think, overall, because it is a perfect cliffhanger. And then the minute he says that her daughter's still alive, and then you see like the credits go and like the song reaches that high point. It's such a great note to get you, oh fuck, I need Volume 2.
Absolutely.
I think Kill Bill is absolute perfection. I love everything about Kill Bill Volume 1. I don't really have any critiques, honestly. I know we kind of had little nitpicks here and there. I don't think they necessarily needed to go as far as they did with the Buck stuff.
Right.
But again, I still like that sequence, and I think every scene in this movie is fucking fantastic. Yeah, this is a high-tier gold trash bag for me. And this is also, this will be a rare, perfect 10 out of 10 on my ranking scale.
Yeah, I would have to agree. I mean, I would also say a 10 out of 10 a gold trash bag, because the little changes or nuances that we would make, it doesn't change the fact that this is an amazing film. This was my first Tarantino film and my favorite to this day.
Mm-hmm. Solid choice as favorite Tarantino movie. It's not my personal favorite of his movies. Once Upon a Time in Hollywood's my favorite of his movies, personally.
I've still never seen that. I've only seen the scene with Bruce Lee.
Yeah, no, and I know that's a controversial sequence, but that movie is fucking incredible, in my opinion. Of all his movies, you feel like you're in that world when you watch that movie.
And with all that out of the way, do you have any plugs that you'd like to drop?
I'll plug in the same stuff I've been plugging. I have a indie one-shot comic called Half Heart that I released, like, a little while ago. It's been a few months, but still, give it a read. I'm really proud of how that came out. It's kind of a independent, dark, romantic dramedy, very personal, autobiographical. Also, have a short film I made a couple months ago. It's very improvised, kind of made it by myself on the spot. It's called The Creative Process. You can also check that out on my YouTube channel. You can follow me on Instagram at Nightmare Room Entertainment. That's pretty much all I have to really plug as of right now.
As for myself, you could find me at Trash Shoes, and I'm going to plug a video that I released on my old channel, Neo Swim, 10 years ago. And that is a Toonami intro for Kill Bill Volume 1.
I don't think I've seen that video of yours, actually. I'll have to check that out.
I will send that to you, so you can let me know what you think.
Yeah.
I used a song here from a Reese's commercial of the time that I thought really blended well with the footage.
Cool.
I definitely have some stuff coming down the pipeline, so be on the lookout at Trashoos. Yeah, with all that, thank you for listening to our discussion on Kill Bill Volume 1.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a cool reference I could use from Kill Bill to sign us off, but I can't, so bye.